Whispers in the Beehive. The night I returned home, the air was thick with an unspeakable tension. I stood on the threshold of the family house, the same one that had once echoed with laughter, now a mausoleum of memories. I could hear their voices inside, my mother, my father, and my brother, snickering at the thought of my return. They had always believed that my passion for supernatural apiculture was a sign of madness, a foolish obsession worthy of ridicule. The last time I had been here, I was just a pest control technician, a scapegoat for a town-wide infestation that had spiraled into chaos. They had cast me out, labeled me a disgrace, and I had vowed never to return. But the darkness I had faced in that isolated village had changed me, twisted me into something they could never comprehend. I raised my hand, trembling, and knocked. The sound echoed like a death knell, and for a moment I hesitated. But then I remembered the unnatural buzzing that had haunted my dreams, the whispers I had deciphered from the hive, and the knowledge I now carried like a cursed crown. I needed them to see. I needed them to understand. The door creaked open, and there they stood, my family, their faces twisting from surprise to disbelief. "You actually came back?" my mother said, her voice laced with a mix of shock and disdain. "We thought you were too far gone to return." I smiled. But it felt like a grimace. "I've brought something with me," I said, stepping inside. The smell of old wood and dust wrapped around me like a shroud. "Something you need to see." They exchanged glances, skepticism etched into their features. My father, once a towering figure of authority in my life, crossed his arms defiantly. "What could you possibly show us that would change our minds about your obsession?" I reached into my bag, feeling the weight of what I had brought. The artifact pulsed with an energy that felt alive, a relic of the horrors I had uncovered. "This," I said, pulling out a small glass jar filled with iridescent honey, shimmering in the dim light. "This honey is not just a product of the bees. It's a conduit, a connection to something ancient, something that feeds off fear. I've learned their language, and I've survived what others couldn't." Their laughter cut through me like a knife. My brother stepped forward, shaking his head. "You sound insane. You really think you can convince us that bees hold the key to some supernatural horror?" The buzzing started softly, an almost imperceptible hum that seemed to emerge from the walls. I felt a chill race down my spine, but I pressed on. "It's not just bees. They're vessels for something older, something that hungers for knowledge. I've seen it, and it wants to be heard." Then the lights flickered. An ominous silence filled the room, and the hum grew louder, vibrating in my bones. I could see the confusion on their faces, morphing into something darker, fear. My mother's eyes widened as she took a step back, her laughter choking in her throat. "What have you done?" I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the jar on the dining table, its contents swirling like a storm. The buzzing intensified, a cacophony that enveloped us, and I felt the air thicken with an otherworldly presence. The honey began to pulse, and in that moment, the room transformed. Shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, and the walls seemed to breathe, exhaling a miasma of dread. "Get away from that!" my father shouted. But it was too late. The jar shattered, and a swarm of unnatural bees erupted from the remnants, their bodies glimmering with dark energy. They spiraled around us, a living tempest. My family screamed, their voices swallowed by the chaos. I stood rooted to the spot, a witness to their terror, and in that moment I felt a strange sense of vindication. This was what they had mocked me for. This was the truth they had refused to acknowledge. "Look!" I shouted over the cacophony. Look at what you've dismissed. This is the reality you laughed at. The bees began to coalesce, forming a nightmarish figure at the center of the room, a grotesque amalgamation of wings and shadows. Its eyes glowing with an insatiable hunger, it reached toward my family, and I watched as their faces twisted in horror, their mockery turning to raw, primal fear. "Please," my mother begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We were wrong. We should have believed you." But there was no mercy in the eyes of the entity that had been awakened. The buzzing reached a fever pitch, drowning out their pleas. I felt a strange calm wash over me, a sense of purpose. I had survived this darkness once. I could do it again. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "I've faced you before. You don't scare me anymore." The entity paused, its attention shifting to me, and for a moment the room fell silent. My family watched, terror etched into their faces. As I extended my hand, a silent pact forged in the shadows. The creature recoiled, the swarm dispersing as if recognizing my resolve. I could feel its hunger, its need to consume, but I had become its master. I had done what they deemed impossible. I had conquered the very darkness they had ridiculed. When the storm, I had returned, not as the delusional outcast they had once known, but as a harbinger of truths they could no longer ignore. I had faced the darkness and emerged, forever changed, a living testament to the horrors that lay in the whispers of the beehive.